So good to see you. It's been quite a while, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah, it has, Tim.
Yeah. So thanks for taking the time to talk to me about this. Um, I wanted to start, if you could just tell me a little bit about your military background and when you decided you wanted to go into the military, and then kind of how long you were in the military.
Well, sure thing. So I'm from somewhat near New York City, only about an hour and a half away. And it was 1 year after the towers that I joined the military, and that was a driving factor for my wanting to join.
Yeah.
I was in for just a couple days shy of 15 years.
Right.
For the majority of it, I served as a medic. I have a few combat deployments as well as NATO operations that I was part of.
Yeah. And so what kind of things did you often do as a medic in the military?
So in garrison, I was just doing sick calls. I was taking care of the daily bumps, bruises, and little illnesses that came up. I worked in critical care for a while. Deployed, I was a standalone medical unit. So I was assigned to a tank unit. And my job was to, patch guys up to get them to a higher level care.
Right. And what deployments did you have? I know you were in Afghanistan, but were there other ones as well?
I've been to both Afghanistan and Iraq.
Okay. And what kind of experiences did you have in both?
A lot of indirect fire, so mortar rounds and such. In Afghanistan, I was doing a lot of convoy deployments. Mm-hmm. Some missions about humanitarian aid. So we helped build a well for a village. But the majority of the time I was there, I was supporting convoy operations. Yeah.
And did you find a lot of it quite rewarding? That's a little bit of a loaded question, right?
That it is. The humanitarian aid, definitely. As a medic, when we went to villages, I would often provide medical care for some of the local villagers. We did a pediatric clinic to give childhood immunizations that were lacking in that area. That part of it was extremely rewarding. Mm-hmm. And I like to say the convoys that I was on that were not rewarding were the good ones.
Yeah.
On a convoy, you want your medic to be bored.
Yeah.
So there was definitely some rewarding. There was a lot of frustration, but I tried to remain positive on the good parts.
Right. And so I know you had a traumatic brain injury. Can you tell me when that occurred, what happened, and then how that impacted you?
So I actually had two pretty close together. The first one was a vehicle-borne explosive at a front gate. The individual detonated this very large bomb, and I was in a Connex large shipping container that we used as an office, and I was thrown across the shipping container, blacked out for my guess is a few moments. And again, I was the medic, so I didn't have time to worry about myself. I was up working on other people. The second injury was another vehicle got hit and was forced into our vehicle, and the concussion blast, when it hit me, it re-damaged some areas.
Did everybody make it out of those vehicles?
On that one, I believe we only had one casualty, and it was a local that was working with us. Mm-hmm. That one, everything just fell into place for it to be not a horrific event. Everybody was behind barriers when it happened. So there was a lot of bumps and scrapes and blast related injuries, but everyone ate dinner together that night. So it wasn't nearly as bad as it could have been. The secondary one, there were some people that did not make it.
Yeah. Were they people that you worked with?
Yeah.
Yeah. Close?
They were people that I had seen for sick call, things that, small talk. I knew, one guy had 2 children. One of his kids was deaf. So he was working on improving his sign language while he was there. So I did know these guys. I wouldn't say overly well, but we had been in country together for a couple months, and you get to know somebody when you're, stuck in a Humvee for 3 hours together. So,
yeah. How did, so first of all, how long did it take you to recover, from the initial shock of that? I know there's ongoing effects and we'll get to that, but how long did it take you to recover?
So again, I went into training mode where I was just going off of everything that I'd been taught. I knew there was something wrong with me, but I didn't have the time to worry about it. I had to worry about all the visible injuries that I could see.
Mm-hmm.
I had a few weeks with headaches. I had blurry vision at times. I'd say I never. It probably took roughly a month before I wasn't having really bad headaches. It's probably close to 2 to 3 months before I felt my balance somewhat normal again.
Yeah. And how long afterwards do you think you started to notice that it had more of an impact on your mental health?
That part. So, when I got back from that deployment, very shortly after, I was still on leave after the deployment. I got notified I was going to Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in Germany, the unit I was with, we were in Germany, so we were traveling, we were doing fun stuff. There was copious amounts of alcohol. So a lot of my symptoms were masked just because of where I was. And alcohol had a nice effect in that it let me forget things. It was socially acceptable to be drinking in a little bit of excess because it's Germany. It's what you do.
Yeah.
I think it would have been noticed a lot sooner had my environment been different. But it really started to show, it was roughly about 4 to 5 years afterwards. When, I got a little older, I started settling down and my lifestyle changed. I wasn't drinking anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And again, a totally different atmosphere. I went from party central in Germany to middle of nowhere, North Dakota,
Right.
where I had time to realize things were not quite right with me.
And were you married? You were married both during when you were in Germany and
Correct.
when you came to North Dakota.
Yep.
Did you have your kids then as well?
My kids were both born in my 2 oldest were born in North Dakota.
Okay. So who first kind of brought it up to you that, things were a little bit different, or, what kind of questions were you getting asked?
So my wife pointed out that we'd go out to eat, and I had to have my back up against something. She noticed that, I was constantly looking around. I was not really engaged with the conversation at a dinner. That was the very first thing that really got noticed. I was jumpier when I came back, which is a normal reaction. It just continued on. And in a lot of cases, it actually got worse for me. But that was the first big thing that was noticed was when we went out in public. She saw that I was constantly scanning, looking around. She started to realize I was looking for escape routes everywhere we went. So that she pointed that out, and I'm like, yeah, I just comes with the territory. But then I started just getting very angry at everything and anything. And I've never been an overly angry person before.
Right.
So that was another changing point. And then I had a dog that I was using. He was pretty much service dog / emotional support dog without having the official title.
Was that the gray dog, the gray hunting dog?
Yep, that was him.
Okay.
But when he passed was when my wife noticed a humongous shift in me, where I started isolating. Unless I absolutely had to, I would not leave the house. And so that was, again, another, and I started to seek treatment, but some family stuff came up and I put all of my stuff on the back burner, which honestly just amplified everything I had going on.
So it's interesting because I vividly remember, so, I mean, you and I basically grew up together. And I remember seeing you multiple times throughout a year, whether we were down in Connecticut or you were up here. And I remember, I'm trying to think of what year it was. I know my little guy was 1 or 2 at the time. And so it would have been maybe 2013 or 14.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. And I don't know where you were, and I wanted to kind of go through that a little bit because I vividly remember the conversation and thinking to myself and saying to my wife afterwards, like, that's not the same person that I kind of grew up with. They're like, and I know you mentioned a few things, but it was really quite stark, and I didn't want to get too, like, there were a lot of people around. It was Easter and you don't want to say anything, but it was so noticeable that, do you remember kind of what you were going through at those times like that?
So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of military, especially medics, have this really nice switch that lets us shut our emotions off. It lets us totally disconnect. And I mean, it serves a great purpose when we need it. I was just in a point where I forgot how to shut that switch, or turn that switch back on.
Right.
So at that point, I was really, really numb. My mom was ill at the time, so I was dealing with that.
Yeah.
And I was just in a isolation.
Like, were you still in the military at the time that you found out, kind of like, when did you first kind of start thinking about PTSD and that was a real possibility?
Yeah, I was still active duty. I knew I had some PTSD symptoms. But again, that military machismo, I was too proud to ask for help.
Right.
Especially the medic doesn't ask for help.
Right.
So I knew I had some, but I was just kind of denying that I needed more help than just myself. And I had myself really well fooled that I could handle it. And again, it was just getting worse and getting worse. I was actually, being a medic, I worked directly for the doctor that was my doctor. And she started noticing I was making mistakes. I was having trouble concentrating. She noticed just the small things that her being a doctor and working with me daily was noticing some of these changes. She just said, "When's the last time you actually got a full night's sleep?" And I just kind of laughed. I couldn't tell her the last time I had gotten more than 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
And that was, honestly, talking to her made me realize I have something going on.
Do you remember what year was that? Do you know?
That would have been probably about 2015.
Okay. How did people around you react when you first started talking about PTSD?
So even when she brought it up, I did not really delve into the self-care that was needed.
Hmm.
It continued to get worse. And when I finally did reach out, um, I had a lot of friends that were very supportive that, while they had never been deployed, they knew enough people to understand a little bit about what I was going through. My chain of command, on the other hand, was not quite as forgiving. Um, they removed all of my responsibilities at one point,
Okay.
and it wasn't based off of performance. It was based off of you're seeking counseling. We're removing everything. I had one of my higher ups tell me that PSTD is not a thing. It's just an excuse to get disability. So the people that I was reaching out for help was telling me I was trying to play a system.
Did what did that do to you at the time when you were thinking about looking for more help?
Um, at first, it beat me down.
Yeah.
It was soul crushing. The best way that I can describe it is I felt I was digging in a hole and had dug myself in pretty deep. And the guy that I was asking for help, throw me a rope. Instead, he kicked dirt down on me.
Right. So tell me a little bit about so you started this is interesting to me because we're both animal lovers. Um, you had one therapy dog, and you still have one?
So I actually have a full service dog now.
Nice. The
Yep.
the Great Dane?
Great Dane. Yes, sir.
What's his name?
That's Spinner.
Okay. How big is he?
He is pushing 180 pounds.
And so what kind of things is he trained to do?
So his primary function is mobility.
Okay.
So I'm a big guy.
Yeah.
At times I lose my balance. I have trouble getting up out of chairs at times. And the reason I have such a large animal is I'm not a small guy. So I
Right.
need something large to lean back against me to hold me upright.
Right.
He also does, this is all secondary, but he helps keep some distance between me and other people. So if I'm out in public, he'll actually stand between me and another person. If they start getting too close, he'll
Hmm.
move them away. If I'm waiting in a line, he'll come and stand behind me so I don't have to look behind myself. I know he's there. I know no one's going to come up behind me when I have a 180-pound dog standing there. So
Unless they're like me and I have to pet every single dog I ever see, but I know I'm not supposed to do that. So
yeah.
tell me about that day that was that the first kind of time that you really went further for help? Was through the Red Sox? It's run to home plate, or what's the
So their organization is called Home Base.
home base? Yes.
The biggest charity that they have is the Run to Home Plate.
Right.
So yeah, it's the first Red Sox World Series win. They went down, they met the president, they did that whole thing. They stopped at Walter Reed.
That's when it started. That's when it started.
Yeah, that's when this program started.
I'm going to test my trivia on this. Was it about 2007?
I want to say 4.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, they stopped at Walter Reed to visit the injured service members. And they said, this isn't right. They're not getting the help they need. So they came back and they started working with the Jimmy Fund, their main big charity. The local hospital, Mass General Hospital, paired with them and actually set up a program for people suffering from, started with PTSD and moved on to the TBI. And they set up this absolutely amazing program.
And it's all funded, right?
It does not cost the veteran a dime. Amazing. At all. They pay for the travel there. Everything involved with your care is completely paid for, whether They charge the government or they use donations. It
Right.
doesn't cost anybody a dime. I got involved with them. I had a really good friend that encouraged me to go to a fundraiser with him, the run to home base. And I'm a Sox fan. So when he
Yeah.
told me that finish line is home plate at Fenway, I'm like, yes, let's do this.
So you actually got to run around and touch home base?
Yes, sir.
Amazing.
So, I mean, it goes through, it's a full marathon,
Okay.
but they have you start just outside Fenway and then you run around Boston. And then you actually get to cross home plate, which it's one of those things. I don't care what team you root for.
Oh yeah. No, listen, I'd do it if they gave me a chance.
Oh yeah. I mean, so it was a great experience, but I was probably at my darkest. And they have a speaker that talks about the program before you actually, so you know what you're raising money for. And
Right.
the guy got up and he was a medic and he started telling his story. And I mean, it's a lot of things matched up between the two of us, both being medics, both carrying that guilt. I mean, I was really, really close at that point to taking my own life. And it wasn't until he said that's when he decided to get help, was when he was actually starting to formulate those plans.
Right.
And I'm sitting there like, I'm formulating those plans. So it was, again, I never believed in fate or karma until that day, because that was exactly what I needed to hear to give me that little push to finally really get help.
So what were your next steps after that? Was your wife with you then, or who was with you?
No, she was at home with the kids.
So you went home, and what did you tell her?
I went through the rest of my day. Because again, I had that nice switch where
Right.
I could just shut off.
Yeah.
But once we put the kids to bed, I said, look, we really need to talk. And she at that point fully admitted that, yeah, you're not the same guy that I married. You get home from work and you go hide in the garage, you go get lost in video games. And she just, at that point, once I admitted I needed help, she started the list of all the things that she had noticed at that point. And I'm just sitting there like, all right, maybe this was not the best time to have this conversation, but
as all good partners do, I've got a running list too.
Oh yeah. But after that, I went to a program in Cincinnati with the Veterans Affairs. That laid a lot of the bed work for me, continuing my care. And right after, we call it terminal leave. So all the vacation time I had stored up before I was officially retired from the military, I was on that status. And that's when I actually went to the 2-week program with home base.
So what kind of things did you do when you were down in Cincinnati? Like, what was it that was really laying the groundwork for that?
So Cincinnati does a type of treatment called CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. So they were sitting there and were helping me challenge my thoughts. And at first I'm like, this is silly. Changing a word's not going to make a difference.
Right.
But it did actually really start making a difference. I went from, they call them stuck points. And one of the big ones I'm willing to share is, I believe that all humans are inherently evil.
Well, that's one you got to work past, right?
Oh yeah. And I mean, I had seen a lot of horribleness during my military career.
And how could you still see the good in people when you've seen that kind of evil?
Exactly. And again, we started out real small with a lot of people are inherently evil. It was a 6-week program. And by the time I left, I still have not really gotten back to a good place with this, but right now I am at a place where some people are capable of being evil.
Okay, well, I can agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a comfortable position where I'm still not the most trusting guy out there, but I also don't think everybody's about to, commit genocide anymore. So
Yeah. Well, that's really good. So you were down in Cincinnati and then you came back up towards Boston and did more of the treatment then?
it was about 4 months in between.
Okay.
Again, the program at Cincinnati, I was a lot better, but I still was not in a healthy spot. So I went through, the weekly counseling.
Right.
At that point, I found out that I was being medically retired from the military because of my injuries.
Okay.
Which again, that was another huge blow because I'd been in for 15 years.
Right.
At that point, somebody asked me who I was as a person, and I would say,
Yeah.
I'm in the Air Force.
Right.
So it was definitely a shock. Plus, I thought I had at least 5 more years to figure out what I wanted to do when I got out. So
Right.
it was a lot of shifts.
Right.
My thinking was better, but I was still isolating a lot. And I was still avoiding dealing with a lot of things. And that's when I decided to, let's try this 2-week program
Right.
that everybody raves about.
And that's what they said, instead of getting 1 15-minute a week or something, it's like every day intensive. Is that kind of what you went through?
So it's basically 8 hours a day of therapy in one way or another. They teach you some meditation techniques. There's group talks. So you're sitting there sharing with other people with similar experiences. You meet one-on-one with a therapist twice every single day.
Wow.
And then to add on to it, they have environmental therapy. So guys that scan rooftops, they make them go for a walk and tell them not to stare at the rooftops. In my case, one of my triggers from non-combat related issues that I have was actually sirens.
Okay.
So they had me stand in front of the emergency entrance of a hospital.
Right. Until you got used to the fact that they were going to be going by.
Exactly. And again, the first time I did it, I that was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But after about a week, I'm like, all right, you know what? This sucks, but nothing bad's happened.
Right.
And I knew I'd be going to talk to my therapist immediately after that about that. So that also gave that nice safety net.
Right. And tell me, like, after that couple weeks of intensive therapy, how did you feel after that in comparison?
I still wasn't where I wanted to be, but my outlook had most definitely changed. I was actually hopeful. Part of what they do with the program is Friday, they actually bring spouses in.
Oh, nice.
And they talk to the spouses about what's going on with their loved ones.
How did that go?
It opened my wife's eyes to a lot.
Did she bring her list?
She did not bring her list, thank God. But it gave her some insight into why I do some of the things I do.
Right.
And also some ways to try and help me with them.
Right.
Just small things like this morning we went to Walmart. I still don't like crowds. And what made me think a few weeks before Christmas I could go to a Walmart? I don't know.
Yeah, that was pushing it a bit.
Oh, yeah. But it's small things like she just touches my arm when she noticed my posture change. Really small things like that kind of pull me out of my head back to the present.
Right.
And that's made a huge difference.
Amazing. What would you say to somebody right now who's going through severe mental health issues or PTSD or whatnot? What would be your advice to someone?
I'd honestly say with everything that I've been through, if I can reach out for help, you can reach out for help.
Yeah.
It's no different than if you break your leg. If you break your leg, you're not going to try and fix that yourself. You're going to go ask somebody for help.
Right.
There's absolutely no shame. In fact, I would actually argue that it takes more strength to ask for help
100%.
than to be selfish and hold it all in.
Right.
And again, if you can't reach out to a therapist or somebody like that, reach out to a friend and ask them what they think. Ask a family member.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm feeling really blue. I'm feeling really worried. Do you think this is something I should go talk with somebody about?
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer you get from them doesn't seem right, ask somebody else.
Here's an interesting thought on that line is when you talk about these things now, do you still get any kind of negative discussions or do you find it more positive than negative?
It's definitely moving more towards positive. And I've noticed that specifically service members reaching out for help.
Yeah.
The stigma's died down a lot with us because there's more knowledge about PTSD and the effects that TBI can have on your mental health.
Right.
So I've noticed specifically with veterans, the stigma has gone away quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
The civilian side of the world, even first responders, it's still very ingrained in them that it's going to cost them their career or it's shameful.
Right. I think you're a paramedic now. You do some medic work still?
So I'm a member of my local fire rescue.
Right. I could never think about doing that. So I don't understand, do you understand why people still think that way? I mean, you're dealing with something really stressful. So of course that's going to cause those issues.
It's still viewed as a weakness, unfortunately.
Right.
And again, it's taking care of your mental health is no different than, going for a routine checkup, taking immunizations and medications. It's part of who you are. And if your mental health is not where it's supposed to be, that has an impact on everything else you do. Mm-hmm. So just going in for a quick tune-up. There's no harm that comes from talking to somebody. And no one should ever look down on you because you were brave enough to ask for help before you decided to, go a different route and turn to chemicals that you really shouldn't be using or worse things than that.
Right. That just make it worse.
Yeah.
So right now, tell me a little bit about what are you doing right now for work and how is that working out given your situation?
So I do multiple work because for some reason I don't know what relaxing is. But
it must be a family trait.
Oh, I'm thinking so. But my full-time job is I work as a health coach, specifically with the veteran population. And all I'm doing with that is we look at the veteran as a whole person. So everything that can have an impact on them, whether it's spiritual, food and drink, their exercise, their personal growth. And I help them set goals based off of the things that really matter to them in life, and get them to where they want to be with their health and wellness.
And how many people have you dealt with in that, since you started doing that work?
So I've been doing that work for about 3 years and I have somewhere between 10 to 15 appointments every week.
So basically you're getting to pay it forward for something that you went through.
That's exactly what it is. I share a lot of what has helped me when certain issues come up. I teach a guided imagery class every week to a group of veterans that let them relax for a couple minutes and get out of their own head. Mm-hmm. And again, I use scripts that I've used myself.
Right.
To be able to calm myself down.
Right.
And just again, having them seek out alternative treatments, whether it's acupuncture or aromatherapy,
Right.
things that Western medicine only recently has started recognizing as being impactful.
Because I bet that's not an easy sell when you talk to a tough military guy to say, "Have you thought about aromatherapy?"
The aromatherapy is a very tough sell. I've had a lot of progress in the other areas,
Sure.
only because I can connect that a lot easier. And the U.S. military is actually using, we call it battlefield acupuncture, but we will actually, instead of using morphine in combat zones, we're actually doing acupuncture instead.
Oh, amazing. And so what are your plans going forward? Do you think you'll ever get to a point where you look at this as something in the past, or do you think you'll deal with it forever?
So this is where I have some very mixed feelings. I choose to carry some stuff with me still.
Mm-hmm.
And it's things that I don't want to let go of, even though they probably are not serving me the best.
Right.
And again, it's part of who I am as a person, even before I joined the military.
Right.
And being a medic, there's a few things that I'm just not willing to let go of.
Like taking responsibility for guilt and responsibility for things.
Yes, I mean, I carry a little bit of that with me, and I'm at a functioning place. And at this point, I'm just afraid that if I let it go, it's going to be a disservice to the guys that I treated.
Right.
And again, there's some other things in the background where I still have a lot of anger and hate for certain individuals. But I've also made my peace with being that angry about something. So that one, again, I don't plan on getting rid of that because the atrocities that I saw, I'm okay carrying that amount of anger for this thing. Again, probably not the most healthy thing, but if these are the two things that I'm holding on to, I still think I'm going to have a pretty fulfilled life at this point.
Right. Do you have anything else that you want to add, or?
No, I mean, the same thing that I like to say is you're never alone. Reach out for help.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.